for it in academic circles called the Ferguson effect. Heather McDonald is a Manhattan Institute senior fellow and the author of a brand new book called The War on Cops. Heather, thanks for joining us here in St. Louis on KTRS Radio.
Oh, I'm so honored to speak with you, McGraw. Thank you so much.
So explain, what is your definition of the Ferguson effect?
Well, I made the term go national in May, picking up on your police chief's phrase to describe the local depolicing that was going on in St. Louis. For me, what I mean is officers backing off of proactive policing, which is pedestrian stops, broken windows, low-level quality of life policing, under the relentless charge from the Black Lives Matter movement as well as the President Obama throughout the political structure that cops are racist for engaging in minority communities. And as a result of that depolicing phenomenon, crime has been going up at alarming rates in many big cities across the country.
So the Ferguson effect being that police would rather, it's not worth it, I lose if I get out of the car and stop the person, don't give the ticket, see what's going on around the corner. It's much safer for me to stay in the car, and I guarantee not going to get in any trouble if I stay in the car.
Right, McGraw. They're still racing to 911 calls when there's already been a victim, but there's a whole range of policing that is discretionary, that officers don't have to do, and that is precisely the policing that has been attacked as a racist oppression of minority communities. So we shouldn't be surprised when, after a certain point of being accused of racism for engaging in pedestrian stops, officers do less of it. This is not some fit of pique or refusal to be held accountable. They are receiving a political message. Policing is political, and they're doing less of what the activists and their media enablers insist on calling racist, when in fact, in many cases, that sort of policing is being demanded by the law-abiding residents of inner-city communities who yearn for the type of order in the streets that more affluent neighborhoods take for granted.
Heather McDonald, our guest, Manhattan Institute senior fellow. Her book is called The War on Cops. There's lots of things that contribute to crime. Why do you make the connection that this Ferguson effect is such a main reason as the cause of crime and violent crime going up in some places?
Well, there's nothing else that has changed in the typical root causes of crime that are usually proffered by the academic left. There hasn't been any change in drug use, drug deaths, income inequality, poverty. Those have all held constant, but it is impossible to talk to an officer working in inner-city neighborhoods today and not hear from him about the virulent street environment that officers are experiencing. They're often surrounded by hostile, jeering crowds when they make a stop or get out of their car, and to hear them say, it's just not worth it, as you say. There's a study that came out last week by the National Institute of Justice, a criminologist there in St. Louis, Richard Rosenfeld, who was an early skeptic, a Ferguson effect denier, very influential. He's now completely reversed himself, and in the work for the Justice Department, he said the only explanation that gets the timing right for this homicide increase is what he says some version of the Ferguson effect.
There's quite a bit of drug use going on, heroin to being a national epidemic. That has sort of certainly risen over the last couple of years. And so we see the crime in Chicago. We see the crime here in the city of St. Louis. And yes, some of it is random, but many, many, many more times it's bad people doing something bad at the wrong time.
Well, what it often is, I don't think it's a result of drug violence so much as kids that have no self-control, that are engaged in the most petty and mindless of gang feuding. And more people are carrying guns now because they know there's less chance of getting stopped. And they have resort to shooting each other if they feel dissed on social media. The heroin use is not what's producing street violence. In Chicago, which is about as clear-cut an example of the Ferguson effect as you can find right now, pedestrian stops are down about 90%, and criminals there are emboldened, and cops will tell you they've never experienced such a hostility in the streets for the last 2 decades is what they're getting now.
Okay, Chicago, everyone knows the crime through the roof in Chicago, but isn't the crime down in New York to the lowest levels it's ever been?
Well, New York is the one counterexample. We have the largest police department in the country. It is gargantuan compared to any other department. And we were seeing a very large increase in shootings and homicides in the first half of 2015, as were other cities. And what our police commissioner, William Bratton, did was just pull every single cop off of desk duty that he could get his hands on and flood crime hotspots and have them use command presence to deter gun violence. And that put a ceiling on the increase that we'd seen. But every other department in big cities, we've had a 17% increase in homicides in 2015 in the 56 largest cities. As Richard Rosenfeld has said, that's almost unprecedented. That is a massive increase. And in 12 cities that have large black populations, the homicide increases start at 50% and go up to about 90%.
That's Heather McDonald, Manhattan Institute Senior Fellow, author of the new book, The War on Cops. Heather, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, McGraw.
You got 8:57 here, Big 550 KTRS. My only caveat to all that is